All right, another video from Norwich 93 CMP. We're going to do the M1 Carbine Club's data sheet, and we're going to break it out into sections. So I got just a little section on the bolt itself, and we're just going to go right through it. But before we start, I just want to show you the version that we're using is November of 2011. Reporter obviously is you. I really do believe that there should be a lot of notes in the back. You're the reporter, you're providing a lot of information. A lot of it is not perfectly in here, so I would just recommend putting a footnote and then flipping it on the back and adding little comments in there. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about is a flat bolt. Flat bolts basically came in two varieties. They're mainly blued. Some of them will have a cutout here, extremely rare. You need to annotate that in the back, but the flat is this. It's that kind of profile. This is a rounded. Obvious, okay? Some of these were parkerized. This one appears to be a type of dark bluing, but in refinishing, this color is parkerized. This is blued. That was the original finish, definitely for the flat bolts. All right, so we just talked about flat and round, check it off, and blued and parked. Now the markings on the left lug, I've seen a lot. Let's see, I think we'll use this one here. So this happens to be an early postal meter. So I have an N on the right lug, so it's as the bullet travels. This is the right lug. On the left lug, there's also a mark also. Happens to be a digit on that one. Okay. Below the left lug would be right there. So that's an Underwood, dot, U dot. That's underneath. You can have multiple markings in locations. AOB used to have marks here and sometimes here all at the same time. You just make sure you annotate that. There was other markings. This is a Grand Rapids. If you can see underneath the right hand lug is a flaming bomb right there. Sometimes in the top right, this is also Grand Rapids, another flaming bomb. Don't forget that there's firing proofs also. You can discuss that if there's a lack of one. Sometimes there's punch marks for hardness tests on the lugs. You can also talk about that if you want. If there is a hole in the bottom, so you need to be careful. Some round bolts don't have them. That's World War II produced. And some post-wars do have a hole in the bottom. Annotate that. That's this part right here. Hold on. This part right here. We're going to talk about the shape of the right lug. So if you look, rounded, that's a rounded. Then you would check off this one. Pointed looks like that. See how the top area is cut more off, and it's almost equidistant from this side to this side? That's called pointed. Then you would check off this one. Okay, moving to the extractors. A V-notch. That's a V-notch. A lot of extra metal on the top and a little notch. Pay careful attention to this corner here. There's a little triangle and a little straight side there, because in the Type 2 we just have a modified Type 1 where it's cut out. You have a little bit of the metal and you have a little thin lip there. That's the Type 2. This one here. Modified. You check that one off. The Type 3 has a complete rectangular bottom to it, portion. Just like that. Notice how it's basically a rectangle in here. That's a Type 3. Now markings, I've seen some Rockolas and IBMs up on the top. later in production. Most of them are on the inside flat area. This one is a indicative of rock roll. It's just a slash. Some of them are extremely faint and you'll have to clean it out. If you really determine that there's not a mark in there and there's no markings anywhere, that's usually a replacement type of, and if it's a type 3, a replacement extractor. Now when we talk about the plungers itself, for the extractor, there's two different types. The early V-notch look like this. Let's see if I can focus on my fat fingers. Well, anyway, you could see it there. It's solid like that. But the later stuff, the Holden Type 3s, are angled like that. It's got a cut in it. Then you would mark this one. Okay? Be very careful when you're doing the extractor springs. They're different than the springs that go into the slide stops. It's longer, it's thicker, it's harder to squeeze, and the gauge of wire is a little bit thicker, so just be very careful, and the ends are ground off. Just be careful with that. Ejector tips, we got basically 4 different types. This is early. There's 3 facets. A light bevel is type 2, a heavy bevel is type 3, and a double faceted is a type 4. And this is what they look like. Yeah, make a liar out of me, right? There we go. 3 facets. See 'em? Light bevel. All flat, circular. Light bevel. Heavy bevel. It's very, very different. Even when it sits in the bolt and you don't take it apart, it's very apparent. And the last one, the 2-faceted. My personal opinion is that this is probably a type 1 that just didn't get the 3rd grind to it, because this is on the same plane as the type 1s. Just wanted to let you know that on the ejector itself is a little knob. The ejector spring is tapered at one end and not at the other. This snaps into place and it stays together as one unit. If you don't have that, more than likely you're missing part of your spring, so just be careful with that. So we went over the ejector tips. Now we're going to move to the firing pins. Firing pins were basically made in 3 varieties. They were marked sometimes on both sides. Most of the time it was on one side. So this is a type 1. If I can focus on it, let's see. Of course not. Why should I? Come on. There's a type 1. 1 facet, 2nd facet. These are basically along the same plane. This is not angled. This is straight back. We're looking like the bullet travels. This was the earliest type 1. The type 2, they're going to grind out a little spot right in here and make a type 2. And you could see how the hammer hits it differently. It was for safety, but you can see how this facet was cut in here. This is a type 2. These are both made by the same manufacturers. Most of the time I've seen all the early stuff was blued. But they did make them in the white. That's unfinished. This is a type 3. You can tell it's a type 3 because this cut right here is on an angle. And this facet is now not flat with that. It's on an angle. And that's how you tell a type 3. Like I said, this one is not finished. This one's in the white. So you would check off in the white. One thing I wanted to tell you about was postal meter. The best way to tell some of the numbers for postal meter. I know I got a 3rd one here someplace. There we are. The early stuff had ends on the side. And the best way to tell what number lies on the opposite side, on the left lug, is when you turn them around. If you point it down towards the ground, this is consistent with the later ones. So this is N9, the orientation of the 9. This one's a 6. Why? Because it's an earlier bolt with the N on this side. When you flip it pointed down, it's a 6. I'm almost positive I have a 7 in a gun. This is an 8, and this is the 9. Now from N9, when it's on this side, and all the higher numbers are all on the left lug. So just annotate that properly when you put it on the data sheet, please. If you got any questions, just leave them in the comments. I'm going to put a little link down below for the actual form itself, and I'm going to do some more videos on all the other parts, sections coming up. All right, take care, folks.